broadcasting live out of a basement in Appleton, Wisconsin. You're tuned in to Fox Cities Core on WCZR Code Zero Radio. We're the show that gives you an opportunity to call in and be a part of the show. Our call-in line is 920-358-0795. Core. My guest today is Mike Gomoll. He's the founder and president of Joey Song. That's a nonprofit organization that uses the power of music to fight epilepsy. Joey Song was named after Mike's son, Joey, who had a rare and devastating form of epilepsy that took his life at the age of 5. Joey had a passion for music and a remarkable talent for remembering songs. Mike wanted to honor Joey's memory and spirit by creating Joey Song. The foundation has grown over the years, bringing together musicians, supporters, and the epilepsy community to work towards better treatments and ultimately a cure for epilepsy. Joey Song is continually evolving, and I can't wait to talk to Mike about what's to come. Mike Gomoll, welcome to Fox Cities Core on Code Zero Radio.
Thanks, Andy. Hey, I was watching your intro there. A lot of familiar faces on there, too. You've had a few of the Joey Song family join you. I saw Frank and Jay and lots of folks.
Well, that's one of the really neat things about Joey Song and seeing the shows. You've got people from up in Appleton. You've got a big base of Madison musicians, like Pi Cohen and Jay Moran, and just many. It's pretty neat to see them performing with these huge musicians that everybody knows.
Well, and then we've got the Viroqua contingent with Mr. Vig as well. So we got all the corners of the state covered, and Wally Ingram's from Beloit. So really, we could do one of those little pin maps. And I'm sure there's some conspiracy theorists that if you connect them, they probably spell out something or other. But we do have a lot of, and then a lot of the other guests that are national have Wisconsin ties as well. I'm sure we'll talk about that over our time together as well. So
the Joey Song, it's been going on for quite a while, and I kind of alluded in the intro what it was about, but can you let us know like how the idea came to you to start this?
Yeah, well, first of all, so I don't get too much credit for being any type of a genius, the live concert event involved truly by serendipity, and I'll explain that as well. So Joey Song started out as CDs. If you put your mind back to 2010, which is when we started floating around the idea of doing this, the idea was to put out music CDs. For those of you of a certain age, that's how music used to come to us. It didn't come to us over the phone. But right around that time, and there was a thing back in the early 2010s of the compilation CD for a lot of charitable causes, political causes and whatever. And what you do is artists would give B-sides or rare tracks, so they'd record something new, put it together, and then your $10.95 or $14.95 or whatever CDs used to cost would go to whatever that political cause was or that charitable cause. And that's what we were looking to do, was to do just that. Unfortunately, 2010 was right around the time when the entire world decided they were never going to pay for recorded music again, or not pay anything more than 0.00075 cents, per stream. So we released a bunch of these CDs, tons of really cool people, the guys from REM, Roseanne Cash, Crash Test Dummies, Delamitri, Freedy Johnston, tons of really great people donated some really unusual tracks to us. Problem is, nobody bought the darn things. And anybody that's in the music business that's listening to me right now knows the effort that it would go into to clear 15, 30 tracks, gratis, from publishing to writers to record companies to labels, knows that that's no mean feat just to be able to, get the music for free. But every time we would release these CDs, we would have a CD release party, which is also something you kind of did back in the day. And so we would have, as we'd release them, we'd have musicians. Freedy appeared, and Michael McDermott and Rhett Miller and lots of really cool folks showed up, and we'd do kind of these standard, 30, 35-minute, 45-minute singer-songwriter sets, and they were great. Well, we found out pretty early on, as the direction that the entire music business has gone, we were making more money off of the live events than we were off of the recorded music, which is very much, unless you're the kind of person we refer to by a single name, Taylor, Beyonce, Rihanna, Bruce, you're not making a lot of money these days off of recorded music. And so that's why, guys are on the road when there's not a global pandemic for 200, 250 days a year, and they're meeting you back at the merch table to sign CDs and all that. The music business flipped And that's right when Joey's song kind of came online. So we started doing these events. And then right around the time when I was kind of scratching my head going, what are we going to do about this? Because we were putting a lot of time and effort into the CDs and they weren't selling. And it was the live thing, but I really wasn't sure where I was going to go. Right around that time, Garbage played a dual headlining show with Flaming Lips at Warner Park, which is the minor league park here in Madison, where the Mallards play. Sorry, I'm showing my age by calling them the Muskies, where the Mallards play. And BV and I ran into each other. We had known each other back in college. I was at Headliners. He was at working with Spooner. And but he went on to win Grammy Awards and MTV Moon Men, and I did not go on to do either of those things. But BV and I, with Freedy, kind of ran into each other backstage, started talking. I'll cut the story a little bit shorter than that. Long story short is one of the things that Butch agreed to do is have his kind of side project, the Know-It-All Boyfriends, come and play one of our benefits. We did that back in 2015, 2016, I think, at the Majestic. We had Chaser, local band, open up. And over time, we developed this model that we're at now, which is we have the KIAB serve as a house band, and then we have all these folks kind of come and join us. And really, once we moved to the Barrymore, which was a bit of a bigger stage, and it's just kind of multiplied. And now, you know, the artists that play 1 year not only want to come back, but they recommend friends. And now we've got what is about to be announced as a multi-day event happening in January of 2025.
How was the process of putting a CD together compared to trying to put a show together?
Well, the CD was easier in many ways because it's a pretty standard process. There's standard contracts, and really all you're asking of the artist, or in some cases their management, is, you know, See, the other thing, Andy, you have to remember is back in 2010, you couldn't get every song that had ever been recorded or released on your phone, right? So getting that rare B-side or the live cut, that was a big deal, at least to, you know, dorky completists like me. But the process of getting it was pretty straightforward. So you either got to the artist or their management and said, hey, we're looking for something that, you know, is no longer in print. And everybody had something in their drawer or something that was a B-side to a single a long time ago. So that part of it was easier. Now, the part of it that was definitely difficult and time consuming was getting all of those gratis sign-offs on the release, right? And in some cases, you know, the problem is all it would take is one person in that chain. You know, if there were 3 writers and, you know, the 2 publishing, or each of the writers had their own publishing, and, you know, add on to that the thing, all it would take is, you know, one of those people to say, no, I'm not going to give up my royalties. And, you know, there's a bunch of tracks sitting on my hard drive that I wish the world could hear, and they maybe will. They just won't hear it from Joey's song because of that. So the CDs were much more time consuming and laborious. The music events is a lot more free form, and there's a lot more ups and downs to it as well. So they're kind of apples and oranges. I'm much more enjoying doing the live events now because there's a little bit more of that buzz with it, I guess is the best way to say it.
Well, we should kind of set some background about why this is such an important concert every year. Epilepsy is obviously, you've got a connection to it. I think a lot of people have connections to epilepsy because it has been historically underfunded, but it is
right.
So many people are diagnosed with it. Joey's song has done a huge thing. They've raised over $1 million, which Can you tell us what that goes towards? Yeah.
So my son, Joe, as you said in the intro, passed away just shy of his 5th birthday in 2010. He had a particularly rare and heinous form of epilepsy called Dravet syndrome. And there's a family of these rare pediatric epilepsies. Epilepsy is like a spectrum disorder, very much like autism or cancer, in the sense that there's not just one of them. There's not just epilepsy. There's multiple causes and multiple ways that epilepsy manifests itself. And so the type that Joe had was a chromosomal kind of stuff that even after, you know, almost 18, 19 years of being aware of it, I still can't properly explain it, but that's more on me than anything else. But while there have been a lot of treatments that have come out over the past 10, 20 years, all they've really done is kind of minimize the side effects. It has been a buzzword in the industry that 1 in 3 people that have epilepsy don't get relief from their seizures through medicine or surgery or diet or other lifestyle changes. That number hasn't significantly changed over the last 20, 25 years, even though many new treatments have come on the market. And what that really says is the side effects have been lessened. So there's been great progress with these medications in keeping the terrible side effects that epilepsy drugs or anticonvulsants can have. We're really not hammering down that number. There's still a lot of people that wake up every day and worry every minute about if there's going to be another seizure or something. So Joey's Song, we really focus on funding research for treatments and cures, funding those really smart people, in the lab coat with their lab coats mixing test tubes. I'm sure it's not done that way anymore, but that really smart lady with the white thing, white lab coat mixing it, and when it turns from green to blue, somebody's life is getting better. And that's really what we focus on. So of that 1.3 million we've been a part of since we started Joey's Song, the lion's share of that has gone to the research community. We also fund other parts that do patient services and those types of things, but we really focus on the treatments and cures because having been a part of it, I know that's the real lifeline. Certainly the patient services help everybody live a better life day to day and cope with the disorder, but finding the treatments is at least what spoke to us and our family.
Well, and Joey's Song does so much. One of the things I enjoyed seeing was a couple of years ago, Fruity Butch and their old boyfriends, they wrote a song based on a child's idea. It was a train. A
train to somewhere awesome. Yeah.
That was great. Things like that, I think makes what Joey's Song is doing so unique. You guys were every year getting bigger and bigger.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, a few years ago, you had the Sylvie was coming up, and then COVID hit.
Yep.
And so you guys were forced to go all digital. Like how, at first was that a thing that made you think maybe we're not going to be able to raise money this year and meet the goals that we're trying to reach?
Yeah, that's always a struggle. I have to, when I don't have my gosh, this is fun hat on and get to talk with all these cool people, the business side of me does come out, and that's always a balancing act. I try to balance the investment because part of the reason we can grow is making it bigger and bigger every year, being able to add more folks and grow our community. But it certainly has added costs. It's not what it was, but this is very much like a business and very much like the concert business. It's about getting as many people through the door as we can, and raising awareness is part of what we do. But it is certainly a balancing act as far as the costs come. And you've given me a great opportunity, Andy, to talk a little bit about something else. I need to point out that all of these artists that come and perform do it for free. Nobody that you're seeing, these Rock and Roll Hall of Famers and Grammy winners and top 40 hit makers, take a penny for their time, right? So for example, I don't know what Butch gets for 5 days, which is what he's here with us, but it's certainly not, a ham sandwich and 2 beers, which is what he gets from me to do it. So we are able to keep our costs down. We're also an all volunteer organization. There's no paid staff. I don't take a salary. As you can see, we have our luxurious Joey's Song International headquarters here in my basement. But that's part of the things that helps us contain our costs. And then the folks at Frank Productions, which run the Sylvie and the Majestic and the High Noon, all places that are going to be involved in the 2025 event, basically give us the venues at cost. Obviously, the folks that are working get paid, but otherwise, so everybody kind of pitches in, and I think that's a testament to both the event and the cause that we're doing. People can take it to heart, and it's easy for people to give of their time or of the resources they have.
These shows are phenomenal. People should, if you've never attended a Joey Song, last year the show, you could purchase a live stream, which if you couldn't make it down to Madison, you could watch it from the comfort of your own home. Yeah. But to actually be there in person, it's a pretty unique experience to see all these different Grammy winners and all these local heroes up there performing together, and just the the brainstorming that goes in each year to making it a unique experience. Last year was the Know It All Girlfriends versus Know It All Boyfriends. There's a big wheel. Spin the wheel and then find out what genre. And then the bands competed for a big belt, which was pretty neat. And it's a struggle to find out, to brainstorm things to get bigger and bigger. It's got to be a little stressful. It
is. It's going on right now, to be blunt and honest with you. As a matter of fact, it's been going on for almost a month already, working with subsets of some of the artists to try to figure out what songs we're going to play. I guess the important thing to point out to people, too, is that Joey's Song, the event itself, at least the Saturday event, is mostly covers, right? So even though we've got, members from the Bangles, and we've got, all of the members of Garbage and Cheap Trick and all these other folks, basically what they're playing is covers, because we put together these Frankenstein monster sort of bands, if you will, right? So the singer from Fountains of Wayne, and the bass player from Soul Asylum, and the drummer from Garbage, and the two gals from the Bangles are singing, and then they're doing a Camper Van Beethoven song or whatever it might happen to be, right? So that's both the stressful part, but the fun part is to figure out, and especially when somebody hits on an idea. And so it's myself and Jay Moran and Butch Vig and Gail Greenwood from Belly that are kind of the core. We got Alex Drosser joining us, Appleton's own, joining us this year as kind of part of that brainstorming team. But I remember when we hit on Son of a Preacher Man for Kelly Stewart to sing a couple years ago, and everybody knew we had gotten that one right. It was like, oh, man, she is going to kill this. And then when we got Come On, Feel the Noise this year with Sierra Swan singing that one, there's just some that where you go, all right, this is going to be great. And so it's a lot of that, people throwing ideas back and forth. Our biggest problem, to be honest with you, Andy, is keeping it under 4.5 hours like last year's show was. That was too long, and that would even make Springsteen or the Grateful Dead cry, when you're doing a 4.5 hour show, let alone the audience members that are standing through it all as well. So it's stressful, but it's also a lot of fun when you kind of hit on it and go, oh, that song's perfect.
I love it when there's a new artist that comes on board. Last year you had Debbie and Vicky from the Bangles, and of course they did a Bangles song, which is kind of cool when those bands do mix up and play some of the original tunes that you remember. But yeah, you mentioned Sierra Swan. She has some pipes on her.
Oh yeah. Well, the really fun thing about that Bangles song is they did Hero Takes a Fall, which Vicky wrote, but Sue always sang it. Yep. So last year was the first time Vicky had ever sang the lead on her song live, and that's again one of the other cool things that you kind of get to do on this is people can flex their muscles a little bit and do some stuff they don't normally get to do. I remember I did our podcast a few weeks ago with Vicky, and we talked about that even though that's her song, she wrote it. That was a Sue Hoff's lead vocals, so that's fun. But yeah, I mean the discovery. So we talked a little bit earlier about people recommending other people, and there's a very Midwest ethos to Joey's Song because that's where I'm from, that's where Butch is from, and that's where a lot of that built up. But by adding Gail and Tanya from Belly, we found like Gina Volpe from Lunachicks. I mean, if it hadn't been for Rick Nielsen last year, she would have been the top shredder on stage. I didn't know anything about them. I'm now a huge fan, and Gina's amazing. Sierra came to us through another connection, and I was aware of her, but when she did the baby, baby, baby on Come On, Feel the Noise, I mean, that was a hair on the back of your neck kind of moment. So it's also introduced us in the Midwest to some of these amazing folks as well. It's super cool.
Has there been one artist that has just been mind-blowing for you to have play this event that you never thought you would get? Madison?
So Rick. I mean, I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and I grew up in the 70s, right? I was in my teenage years, and Cheap Trick was our band. I mean, that was between the Rockford Boys and Robin being from Wisconsin Dells. I mean, that was pride. And growing up, being a teenager in the 70s, every show at the Coliseum until Cheap Trick broke had Cheap Trick open. So I saw Cheap Trick open for Queen. I saw Cheap Trick open for Kiss. I saw them headline to half of the Dane County Coliseum. And I have to tell you, as you probably know, Andy, during the show, I am running around. But when the Nielsen Trust did that set, I went around and I stood behind the speakers where Rick was, and I just sat there for the entire set going, Rick effing Nielsen is playing my benefit. And that was a mind blower. That was one that we had been trying for a couple of years to get Rick to come, and the schedules just didn't work. And when it did, I pinched myself when he walked into the venue that night going, holy man. So yeah, Rick.
But you mentioned people were taking pictures of his amp.
Yeah. Yeah. So even last year, the year before, when Rick couldn't make it, Miles Nielsen, his son, brought the Budokan amp, right? The amp that Budokan was recorded on. And there were people the year before taking pictures. But then again, this year, when word spread, the amp is here. And there were literally folks with their cameras out, doing the selfie on the stage because, once they set up Rick's amp, when Mark, his roadie or his tech, set up his amp and his microphone with the picks, nobody touched it. It was like, nope, you can't go near it. And so everybody was taking pictures, and yeah, it was as close to the Charlie Berens phenomenon, which is everybody wants their picture. Charlie's one of our regular guests. Everybody wanted their picture with Charlie. Well, every musician wanted their picture with the amp. Great. Just great.
Charlie's done a really good job the last couple of years. He a couple of years ago did the auction for the tackle box or something, toolbox or something that he found. And is he normally winging his material out there?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the first year he did his Wisconsin Goodbye set. So I think he pulls stuff out of his set. And then last year, he and Adam did some of the songs from their album, which I think I have around here somewhere, but I'm not going to waste your time looking for it. So that part is out of his set, but the auction, and then last year he also helped us with the big wheel spin with Big Brian Butch. That's all off the cuff. So, and when I'm setting up the show and doing the run of show, I just do 10 minutes Charlie, and I just assume he'll kill it, which he does every year.
You mentioned your podcast, the Joey Song Podcast, which I've been slowly digging into. Lots of great episodes. Some are about the artists that are playing, and then some are interviews. You've got one with a member of the Go-Go's. Really?
Wow. Yes. Yeah. So, not to turn this into a TED Talk on marketing, but one of the issues that now I've got my marketing hat on as opposed to my concert impresario hat on, is helping to educate people on who some of these folks are, because while folks like you and I, Andy, are deep in the woods music dorks, most people are casual listeners and know what they like, and especially folks of my generation and yours in the generation behind me know songs, maybe know artists, but certainly don't know so-and-so was the lead singer of, right? And so because Joey Song is such a unique event, there's so much to explain to the first-time person, right? That the example I always give, and it's no slight to my pal Chris, is if I said to the person on the street, hey, Chris Collingwood is playing the Joey Song benefit, 98% of the people would, give you the Scooby-Doo, because they don't. And so no, if I said Chris Collingwood from Fountains of Wayne is playing Joey Song, you'd get maybe, I don't know, I'm making these numbers up, 37% would say, oh, I've heard of Fountains of Wayne. But if I told you the guy that sang Stacy's Mom is coming, you go, oh, I love that song, right? Well, to do that across all of our bands with some of the folks we've had in the past, plus, again, if I just drop a Vicki Peterson on you, maybe. Bangles, you would know, so it's a long process. And so I really look at the podcast as a way over time to introduce people to both the bands and the people that are coming. So then it's kind of more of a, okay, now I got it. Collingwood, Fountains of Wayne, great. Bangles, Walk Like an Egyptian or whatever it is kind of stuff. So it really, first of all, it's fun for me, and it's a general marketing tool because it also markets to their fans. But I also kind of look at it as an education thing to really introduce some of these amazing folks to people that might just, turn on the radio in the morning and turn it off when they leave the office or get out of the car.
Well, I do resemble that remark about being a music dork, but I learned stuff when I was listening to the podcast. There was the Fountain of Wayne's episode you mentioned. I think it was called Road Song, which I'd never heard before. And then I went and looked it up on Spotify right away and started listening to it. It's a great song. I never heard of it before. So I think even people that are very into music and knowledgeable, they're going to learn something with these podcasts. You mentioned something in that Fountain of Wayne's episode about seeing Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze, and you said it was possibly at the 930 Club, which I right away, the 930 Club is one of those iconic clubs in Washington, D.C., but you didn't remember if you saw him at the 930 Club, but either way, were you at the 930 Club at one point?
Yeah, I've seen a few shows. So back in my pre-long hair and tattoo days, I worked for IBM and did a lot of traveling around. And the places I went were Bethesda, Washington, D.C., and New York were the two places I went. Well, great places to go if you're into music at all, right? So I'd see shows at Irving Plaza and, all the New York venues. And I would see stuff. I would go to 930 was a place that I went. I'm trying to think of this getting old. There's the Birchmere, which is in Virginia somewhere, that are all within, spitting distance of Washington, D.C. So I think 930 is where I saw Glenn. I saw him a couple times. There was a time when Squeeze was on hiatus, whatever you want to call it, where Glenn he had both a solo band, one of the all-time great, Glenn Tilbrook, and the Fluffers. I'll just leave it at that. So I would see him do that show, and I saw him, like I said, at the 930, and looks like my screen has frozen, hasn't it? But I hope you can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
Yeah, which is good. Unfortunately, the expression on my face on the frozen screen is terrifying.
That's the expression I had on my face when I heard you say you were at the 930 Club.
But Glenn would do these, he used to call them cabaret shows. And so it would be him and an acoustic guitar. I think his son might have joined him on some of them. And he would just basically do a few Squeeze songs and covers. And he did Red Dragon Tattoo before I had heard it. And I'm like, holy crap, what is this song? Because again, it's just that slice of Fountains of Wayne, I don't know what you would even call it, reverential stuff. So it's amazing. It's truly amazing.
Well, you worked at a club in Madison in the 80s, right? You had to see some pretty spectacular acts coming through there.
Yeah, so for those of you that were around Madison in the 80s, there was a club called Excuse me, the soda went down the wrong tube. Headliners on University Avenue, next door to where the Church Key was then and is now. And it was about a 1,000-seat venue, and we used to get a lot of the easiest way for me to describe it is MTV bands on the way up and the 60s bands on the way down, right? So we would get, Savoy Brown and, some of those kind of bands on the way down. And then we would get a lot of the MTV bands on the way up. So Joan Jett and John Cougar and REM and the Police. U2 is a very memorable show. I remember it was the Boy Tour, I think, that U2 came through. And everybody knew, like, this band won't be playing here very long. And so what we would get is a lot of the bands, not to, again, TED Talk number 2 on how people used to book tours, and they probably still do in a way. For these 500 to 1,000-seat venues, they would book Chicago, Minneapolis, the Detroit, and then they would fill in the rest of the dates in smaller towns like Madison or Dubuque or, that kind of stuff, and the smaller things, which was wasn't the only way, but it was a good way where a smaller city with a lower price point could afford these bands, because if they weren't playing, they would be sitting in a hotel and they'd be paying roadies and all that other stuff. So you would work out deals with agents to get them. And so, we wouldn't get U2 on Friday, but we got them on Tuesday, kind of stuff, and tons of great bands. And that's where Spooner, which is the band that Butch and Duke were in, back in the day, would play, and how I got to know them, because we kind of hung around in the same circles. But yeah, Headliners was great for Madison. There was a much more robust live music scene in Madison back in those days. I could name, Merlins and Bunkies and OKs and, all these really great clubs that were around, and it's a shame. There's good ones around now, but it's not quite the same as it was.
Yeah, it seems like Madison is very into destroying their old historic buildings currently and putting up those high-rise apartments all over the place.
Man, you can't go up East Wash Avenue, and it does. I am at the point, Andy, in my life where I am the old man telling the kids to get off his lawn. So I freely admit that, but it's East Wash Avenue now looks more like it would in any big city with all the high rises, and I guess that's progress. So.
We were talking about some of the people that have performed at Joey's Song. We did not mention your son, Sam. He's performed at past Joey Songs, and he's really good. So the music is obviously an interest that the family shares. Sam, I believe he played an original song a couple of years ago. Last year he did, I think, something from the Beatles, and it's cool to see him up there again with all these musicians. And just knowing what he's been through, it puts a little more kind of a personal spin on the show. Not only that, but in between performances, you guys do a good job of explaining what Joey's Song is and what you've been doing. You've got, I don't know what the correct word, vignettes maybe or something?
Yeah, it's a good one. I'll go with that
one. Who's putting all that stuff together?
So we're very fortunate. Lots of folks. Well, let me do it this way. If you go to the Joey Song website, joeysong.org, which you have been putting up on the screen frequently, which is great, and click on our board, there you go, a board tab, we have both a very distinguished board of directors and something we call our industry advisor group, which includes many folks from the music and film business. And one of the folks that's both on our board of directors and our entertainment advisor group is a gentleman named David Michaels, who is a filmmaker, and has tons of connections. I met him through Butch. And David is a Hollywood filmmaker. And if you IMDb David Michaels, you will find that he worked with Samuel Goldwyn during Goldwyn's last few years at MGM and lots of other stuff, and continues to produce movies. And David helps with a lot of that. He puts a lot of time and effort into both creating the concepts behind it and then doing the filming. If you watch some of the shorts from last year, he's the fella in the stocking cap that's asking some of the questions. That's David, and he helps and literally brings in Hollywood level talent to help us film and edit those.
And talking about the event getting bigger and bigger, not only are you playing these clips in between, but last year you recorded your thank yous so that you didn't have to remember the plethora of thank yous that you would normally have to stand up there and read. Did you like that method of having that pre-recorded so you didn't have to worry about forgetting anybody, the pressure that comes with that?
Yeah, that was exactly it. That was exactly it. And if I had done that live, it would have taken twice as long because I also cry at grocery store openings. So by thanking everybody ahead of time when I didn't have to look at them and think about it, otherwise it would have taken twice as long because I would have been blubbering like a baby. And it was a better way to do that. When you know the limitations of the talent, in that case me, you try to find ways around them so that you can kind of keep things moving along.
Has there ever been a big foobarb during one of the shows where something started to go wrong and somehow got fixed?
There were two from last year's show. The first of which was when we were going through the jam set, it was time to sing Feel Like Making Love, which our buddy Dave Perner was supposed to be singing. I think the band was starting to noodle with it, and there was no Perner.
Oh, I remember that.
And there was nobody that... So the Joey Song is kind of a loose conglomerate of stage managers, and nobody was finding Dave. And I literally, and if you know the backstage at the Sylvie, he was in the far dressing room at the end of it, which was more than my 63-year-old legs could take and 63-year-old lungs. And so I had to go running back there as the band's trying to keep playing the intro over and over. And I'm just screaming, Perner! And I had looked in a few other places, and I won't say what they are because it'll be disparaging to Dave. But I finally found him and dragged him out. So that was one. And then the second one was at the end. I think we were supposed to be playing The Weight or Everyday People. I don't remember which one it was. But the the monitor was wrong, the teleprompter with the lyrics on it. And so the band started playing the right song and the wrong lyrics came up, and somehow the band got through it as well. So, and then there have been a few others that have, but those are two memorable ones from last year where it's like, what are we doing here, kids? But that's the fun, and that's the beauty of kind of that do it on a shoestring way that we do things.
This year, it seems like there's some changes. I've seen Freezing Man around as a name, and it looks like the whole thing is going to kind of take on a different form this year. Are you able to talk about any of that?
I am. Technically, we're not announcing the format until September 9th, so I'm sure I will get in trouble with the marketing folks, but what the hell? You only live once, and I'm the boss, so if I want to change the rules, I'm going to do that. So one of the things I mentioned to you a little bit earlier is the show last year went on to 4.5 hours, which is just too darn long for any show, but especially one that's geared towards older audience, shall we say, as ours is. Not that there's not plenty of stuff for the kids, but if you look at the active artist, it skews towards an older demographic. And the Sylvie is a glorious venue, perfect for what we do, except for the fact that there's only about 150 seats in a 2,500 seat venue or capacity venue. So one of the things that, and I'll try not to sprain my elbow patting myself on the back, but everybody keeps wanting to come back, which says something that we're doing something right with the venue. All of our artists, and we always try to add new artists every year, and we've added a couple. And we can talk a little bit about what those are in a second. But we can't keep adding artists and not do something to change the format. But we also can't have these artists, as I mentioned earlier, that come in for 4 and 5 days and then come and play, one song. Not that anybody has ever complained, because not one person has ever complained about not having enough of a role at Joey Song. But I also want to be respectful. These are not, this is not you and me, Andy, with a washboard and a comb and tissue paper singing, Stanley Brothers songs. These are pros. So what we're expanding to is a series of full band shows in the week leading up to it. And the Freezing Man is a takeoff on Burning Man. We were trying to come up with a way to brand the festival that's lighthearted and plays into the Wisconsin in January. And there's not one Wisconsin native that wouldn't recognize what Freezing Man is. So we're going to do a whole bunch of shows. And while it's not 1,000% solidified, between the Sylvie, the High Noon, and the Majestic that week leading up to it, we're going to have sets by Soul Asylum, Portugal the Man, a version of the Bangles with Debbie and Vicky, Letters to Cleo, Belly, the Know-It-All Boyfriends, Silver Sun Pickups, Laura Jane Grace, and local hero up there by you, Kenny Hoopla, is going to be doing a set as well. There's a few other things we're working on as well, but that's what Freezing Man is going to evolve into, is going to be more of a festival. So then all of these bands and folks that would join us on Saturday will still join us on Saturday, but then it'll just be the All-Star Jam, but they'll have had a chance to play full sets and kind of flex their musical muscles. So that's the idea. By September 9th, we should be able to announce who's playing with who and when. But right now, that's kind of the conglomeration that we're looking at.
Well, that sounds really exciting. And I'm wondering, as far as the tickets go, is it going to be something where people can purchase tickets for one event at a smaller venue, or is there going to be like a VIP ticket available where they can just get the whole shebang?
I believe, and that's still a bit of a work in progress, there is not going to be like a festival ticket. And one of the reasons why that's not going to be the case is, honestly, if we did sell a package that, this ticket gets you into all the shows, then that could mean, I don't know how to describe this without sounding like a goof. Once the ticket for the Soul Asylum Fountains of Wayne show is gone on that thing, it's gone, even if the person doesn't use it. And so that's a lot of concerts over a 5-day period. And so we know there are going to be people that aren't going to go to everything. And because these wonderful artists are donating their time for free, I want to make sure they're playing to a house full of smiling faces. So there isn't going to be necessarily a festival ticket per se, but there will be some ways that if you purchase one, perhaps you get a discount for some of the other shows as well. So we'll put together a few packages that make sense, but it's going to really be when you go to the Ticketmaster page that we'll set up for this, you'll just tick, I need 2 tickets for this one and 1 ticket for that one and so on. So, but there's been a ton of back and forth. And again, the talent team at Frank, along with Scott Leslie, the CEO there, have been helpful in helping me kind of sort and juggle this out and figure out what makes sense.
As far as the festival this year, it's going to be announced officially in a couple weeks. The website already has some information, as you mentioned, if people want to go to joeysong.org. It's January 8th to 11th, which the first year it's going to be a multi-day event. Is there anything that goes on otherwise throughout the year? Any events or things?
Yeah, no. Other than there's, as of right now. So now you're really getting into the long-term strategic goal of Joey Song. And I guess I can take a minute to talk about that. Right now, no, there's nothing. It's a full-time gig. This is what I do. And I literally spend several hours a day I usually take a week off afterwards of recovering to go at it. But having said all of that, and this may bore the pants off of your audience, so everybody, I apologize for the next 5 minutes while I talk strategy here. We could do Joey Song a different way, and we would have already had some larger artists come into town. And let me explain what I mean by that. Artists, especially those that play big venues, have a schedule set, and many of them have 6, 8, 12 months planned out ahead of time. And I am fortunate with some of the folks that, are part of our board and our list of artists. We can get to just about any artist. We don't get them, but we can make connections. As you can probably guess, when you've got Butch Vig on your team, people will answer the phone. Now, if what I said to, and I will use let's pretend he was still alive, Elvis Presley. If I said to Elvis, and Elvis was interested in our thing, can you come to Madison at your convenience and play a show? I would have a higher hit ratio than what I have, because Elvis may say, yes, I'm available, and please don't call the National Enquirer that I'm saying Elvis is alive. But, Elvis might say, yes, I can come any September 3rd and August 4th and, July 18th. Then we could put on a show, raise some money, and move on. But that's not what Joey Song is. So what I have to do is find out who's available at that week in January. And there's a number of logistical reasons why we choose that week. Having said that, that doesn't mean Joey Song couldn't evolve. And I would always like to keep that as a very special Madison thing because of, as you mentioned, all of our local Madison musicians between Jay and Pi, and I'm blanking on the rest of the names, Alex and Frank and everybody else and Corey. There's a special thing to that, and I always want that to be a Madison thing. But that doesn't mean Joey Song couldn't evolve into being in some of these places where the musicians are, where I'm not asking them to come to Madison in the middle of January for multiple days, but literally telling them, can you throw your guitar in the back of your car and drive down to the Avalon in LA, or to, 3rd and Lindley in Nashville, or Irving Plaza in New York, and play a set. So there could be a day, I would like there to be a day, when we're doing multiple Joey Song events throughout the country. They would not look like Madison. Madison is unique in so many ways. But there could be a day. But right now, the task in front of me is figuring out how to run a 4-day event in multiple venues and stay sane.
Well, and you're also taking a risk with the January dates, which you haven't run into a problem yet. I think one year there was some snow, but
yeah,
nothing that was like a freezing rain or anything like that.
Yeah, well, and part of that, and here's one more way I will compliment these amazing artists. Because of that, everybody does come in a day or two before. Now, part of that is so we can rehearse, which if you saw some of the early Joey Song events, you would question whether that ever happened. But now, we rehearse ahead of time. So in the old format, which was a Saturday show, everybody would come in Thursday night, to give us that buffer in case there was weather, because traveling through, all the hubs around Madison, whether it's Detroit, Minneapolis, or Chicago, all it takes is, a cold front to come through or something, some bad weather, and it can block a whole lot of people out. And everybody understands that. That's one of the beauties of this, is all of these people travel for a living and they understand what contingency planning is. And so far, we've been okay. The only thing that stopped us was COVID. And it stopped more than just us. But yes, we are taking a bit of a chance. And honestly, Andy, that's sometimes my biggest sell against people is, it's Madison in January, but you're not going to be outside very much. Some of these LA people don't even own a winter coat. So what are you going to do?
You recently had a birthday. Got a message from Paul McCartney?
Well, yes, technically I did. Now, we all know that to be a concert promoter, you have to have a little P.T. Barnum in you. So I'm sure what it was I do not know Paul. So I will lay my cards on the table. But I have been a fan since I saw her standing there on the 45 back in whatever that would have been, 65 or 66, when I was 5 years old and was already a huge Beatles fan. And I've been a part of the fan club, and I'm sure that's just something that's automatically generated. But it popped up on my watch, and, Paul McCartney, Mike, they say it's your birthday. But I will tell you something funny as a side note. Back in 2019, when we played the Barrymore, one of our guests was Brian Ray, and Brian's day job is he plays bass and guitar with Paul and has for the last 20 years. And so I texted Brian with that picture, and I said, in my head, I'm going to imagine the boss getting up, pouring himself a cup of tea on July 22nd, going, I got to make sure I text Gomoll, to which, of course, Brian laughed and said, you should continue to think that. So that's how I left it. So in my mind, that's what happened. Paul woke up in his New York apartment, poured himself a nice cuppa, maybe made some toast, and realized that July 22nd was my birthday. What I'm really expecting it is next year when I turn 64, because then I'm really expecting a very specific text from Sir Paul.
Well, it's just, again, incredible the people you've got to come to Madison and do this. Brian May, of course, played guitar for Etta James. He was part of her touring band, and he
was actually her musical director while still a teenager.
Which
is pretty
amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
So have you been an attendee at the Mile Music Festival up in Appleton?
I have not, and Frank and Dave and everybody keep harping on me to do it, and I have not. I know very, very well of it. That's quite a sentence there. My English teacher is spinning in her grave right now for that one. I do know that one of the years when the Baseball Project played up there, for those of you that don't know, that's Mike and Peter from REM, along with Steve Wynn and Scott McCoy and Linda Pittman. They prepared for that show by playing a show in my driveway earlier in the week. So that's my closest rub with Mile of Music, is that the Baseball Project warmed up by playing a gig in my driveway for my neighbors.
Mike, I'm sure you've got a lot of stories you're not even telling us. Is there somebody, a really big name that you're gunning to get at a future Joey song, but still haven't been able to sink the hook yet?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. I met Eddie Vedder in 2020, so not to dissuade many of our local Wisconsinites, but I'm a lifelong Cubs fan. Now, that's because I was born, I'm so old, and I grew up, in those formative years living in Racine when there were no Milwaukee Brewers and we all got Channel 9, and I just never switched allegiance. And I met Ed. We were both part of Randy Huntley's fantasy camp, which is where old guys like he and I go to pretend we can still play baseball like we did in high school. And I talked with Ed, and I told him of our event, and he signed a bunch of stuff for me and said, yeah, maybe someday. And I haven't been able to close that deal. There may be an opportunity sooner rather than later. There's obviously Folks that are not of a realistic, we just mentioned earlier, if Paul Paul is our Mozart, right? So he would be the person. But Ed's pretty high up on that list. The other one that's high on the list because of his relationship with Butch is obviously Dave Grohl. But those are not yet, I say yet, realistic yet. We kind of have to prove ourselves every year and keep moving up that. And I guess now would be a good time because it's not a secret, because you can see it on our webpage, but we've upped our game a little bit. So this year you mentioned the Go-Go's. Jane Weedland from the Go-Go's is joining us. So that's another Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. We've got John Resnick from Goo Goo Dolls. So we've added Go-Go's and Goo Goos. That's just probably what I'll be saying at the end of the night on Saturday if I can get a word out. Joining us. We've got a couple other folks we're poking around at that I'm not going to disclose right now, that are of that same stature, maybe even a little higher, somebody that's playing stadium shows right now. And so every year it's kind of an incremental rise. But Ed's in that category, and Ed has supported Cure, which is one of the main charity we give our money to this. So I know Ed's got a soft spot for the epilepsy community as well. So those are the kind of folks. Obviously, if Taylor or Beyonce would like to come and play, I think we can find a slot for them as well.
Well, it's got to be hard to limit the size of this. It really had to get bigger because once somebody plays it, it seems they roll into the annual group that performs every year because nobody wants to not do it again.
I'll tell you a really interesting story. So as I was putting together the week of events and was scheduling and slotting in folks, and right now, again, it's not etched in stone. It looks like we're going to do the Bangles show on Friday. And I was talking with Vicky and was saying, so if you can just come in on Thursday if you want to, because she's a California gal, she lives in New York right now, and she said, well, when's the first show? And I said, well, at least on Wednesday, maybe sooner. She goes, well, I'll come in on Tuesday or Wednesday because of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And the family, and again, I'm not trying to say it's me, it's them that we've created. Now these people are all friends because they may know of each other, but they don't know each other, all of them. I sit on social media as we all do, and I'm friends, and I watch them now liking each other's posts. And there's a really cool family that's kind of come out of this. And it is people, always want to come back. And I mean that seriously. I can tell you, if you look at the past list, especially since we were at the Barrymore moving forward, if somebody hasn't come back, it's only because their schedule doesn't make it work. I've never had anybody tell me, nope, we're done. I did my time. So it is a lot of fun. And I know the artists have a lot of fun not playing their songs and playing other songs.
I was delighted to see that the full belly band was going to be there next year, and the full Letters to Cleo, which I saw you and Sam at that show. I saw you in attendance there. Yeah.
They both, and I was basically told by Kay and I was told by Tanya, you need to ask, because I can be real aggressive on some things, and on other stuff it's like, well, they're already giving a lot of their time. But yeah, it's great, and there's going to be some others. I guess I can talk about it right now. I don't know if it'll happen, but Chris is going to try to put Fountains of Wayne back together and do a full Fountains of Wayne show. And there's some other stuff going on. So yeah, it's great.
I can't wait to hear more details on this. Again, an incredible job. It's if people haven't attended the show, go to it. If you're from Appleton, it's so cool to see Frank and Alex up there.
Yep. And
with all the guys from Madison. It really is a unique experience, and it's another thing that makes Wisconsin so great. Again, the dates for Joey's song is going to be January 8th through 11th, 2025. It's going to be called Freezing Man. You can find out more at joeysong.org. Go and check out the Joey Song podcast, and also check out the Seriously Sun Prairie podcast, which I try to catch once in a while. Michael, thank you so much. I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you spending an hour with us. And again, joeysong.org. Michael, thank you. You've been watching Fox Cities Core on WCZR Code Zero Radio.